Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Kunsang Payo Choling. We're always glad to have you join us for a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo. This evening, her teaching is entitled Devotion and Guru Yoga. It was given back in 1989, and as usual, they're wonderful. That's my opinion. But anyway, you'll see what your opinion is, and we'll start now.
In order to begin today's teaching, I would like to tell a story. Sometimes these stories elucidate the point that we are trying to make better than any teaching ever can. But the problem with these stories is that while it is beneficial to apply them personally, sometimes we apply them so personally that we don't understand how they relate to the teaching of Dharma itself. And so I will try to make some explanation there. I once knew a man who was a friend of mine for a very long time. And I knew this man as a young man. Really a man in the formative years, even though different people do their formative years at different times. I would say I knew him when he was during that time. The impression that I have had of him was that he was truly searching, truly casting about in the search for meaning. There were times that I thought the way that he cast it about was not very efficient. And it seemed to me that often the decisions that he made and the observations that he made were not exactly on the mark. But I had to hand it to him. His search was noble. He seemed to feel that there was some purpose in his life. He seemed to feel that his life had a meaning they had not quite uncovered. And he exhibited a strange combination of a kind of a noble preoccupation with this potential meaning that his life might have, with this search that he was doing. And he combined that with not doing anything at all to change or to challenge himself. And that was the part that I had some difficulty understanding. The part that caused him to preserve or reserve himself, or kind of put himself on hold in many ways, not really opening himself, not really exposing himself, because of this idea that there was some purpose or meaning that he had yet to uncover. And he kept himself, I think, contracted, private. And yet, for all this talk about a great search, for all this talk about a higher purpose, this man could not seem to change. He could not seem to grow. He could not seem to expand. He could not seem to really put in what it takes to accomplish something extraordinary. Anyway, this man continued, and every time he went into a relationship, including the relationship that he had with me, he always made this noble declaration. And the noble declaration was something like, the path comes first, or the meaning comes first, or that is the truth of my life. I could hardly agree with that, and I could heartily agree with it. I have no problem with that at all. But it does seem a little odd to make a grandstand play about announcing it at every turn. Through the course of any relationship that I ever saw him have, or through the course of his life, he continued to, I think, hide behind these declarations. He continued to pretend that they still existed, even though I know that over years he was becoming harder and harder and harder, because he knew that what he was hopeful about when he was young was not happening, was simply not taking place. And this thing that was a flame to him, that kept him warm, that provided shelter, that was his emotional refuge throughout his early life, became cancerous and began to eat at him, till it seemed like over a period of years there wasn't much left. Then, during the last period of time that I myself had a great deal of exposure to him, or relationship with him, this man watched someone very close to him that didn't make a lot of noise about these things, was quietly a nice person, did the best that they could, and just sort of went on with their lives, make progress that he had never made. And he felt the terrible pain of being left sort of in the sideline somewhere. At that point, his life changed radically. He developed this new philosophy, which he said was an extension of this early passionate hope. But I knew him during both these times, and it's not the same thing. And this philosophy was me first. I'm number one. The philosophy was a philosophy of that allowed for what looked to me like castle and moat building. And he ranted and raved about this meaning that he had found. And the meaning allowed him to be selfish, and it allowed him to stop. Just stop. Many things about him stopped at that time. He never changed the way he dressed. He never listened to any different music. He never went any place different. He never did anything different. He simply stopped. And yet if you ask him, he says that he has found what meaning is. Meaning is about me. I'm number one. The point of life is to make me happy and do what I need so that I can have what I need. I want my space, I want my goods, and I want my approval. And it's all about me giving myself what I need. To look at this man now from a distance, he looks embittered, old inside. Other people that see him can recognize the darkness and the contraction. He is not the same. Now, why am I making such a big to-do about this story? Well, many of us actually can recognize something of this, can't we? There is something of the man in every one of us. There is a change that each of us have undergone over a period of years. And it's a natural change to some degree. The change has to do with the hopefulness and spontaneity and movement of youth, and most particularly the way that youth somehow is not crystallized yet, that there's a lot of movement and flexibility in it, that we can appreciate in youth potentially all goals yet to be realized. When you're young and you haven't lived yet, you can assume that you will climb not only a mountain, but every mountain. You can assume that you will accomplish everything that there is to accomplish. You have no reason to think otherwise. You can cling to your own hopes and dreams and think that every piece of them will come true, and because of that, your life is like a candy store, like an open book, something as yet untasted and unread. And we have all experienced, although we don't like to talk about it, we really don't like to talk about this, that as our lives progress, we have a narrowing begin to happen, a congealing that begins to happen. We begin to adjust some of our hopes. We begin to adjust some of our goals. We begin to narrow it down. Because really what's happening is that we see they're not going to all come true. Not every one of them. And in that process, we avoid looking at ourselves and what's happening to us with the intensity that we would avoid looking at a rotting corpse. That's a terrible analogy, but human beings have a terrible fear of their own death mask. And as we move through that passage, we move through the view of that death mask. And that's part of growing up. It's part of what changes in us. It's part of what becomes stronger. We survive viewing our death. Survive viewing this death mask. If we mature well, what we actually do is go through a period of reevaluation. And the reevaluation, if it is meaningful, if it is truly useful, will take into account the situation of cyclic existence, will take into account the karma of our minds, the karma of our lives, the content that we are exposed to. And reevaluating that, and knowing that, and learning that, will develop a wisdom of cause and effect, an understanding of cause and effect, a realistic view of cause and effect. And relying upon the wisdom of that realistic view will then redefine the goal. We'll come to understand that the goal is perhaps not the same as we thought it was when we were younger, when we thought we could really conquer the world. But in fact, if we understand what the goal might be very similar to the goal that the Buddha described. enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. That's not the same as conquering the world. Because one is about me, and the other is about realizing the innate nature of all phenomena and one's own nature. To come to that point is a very rare thing. There aren't that many people in this world that have as their goal enlightenment. There aren't that many people that have come into contact with realizing that the youthful goals that we have that are about me, the youthful goals that we have that are about my satisfaction and my accomplishment and my doing this and my doing that, aren't really reachable. Not all of them. But that one might choose instead to understand something of one's own nature and to achieve the awakening to that nature, to continue on a quest that is mightier, more profound, and more meaningful, utterly meaningful, than anything that we might have tried to understand as a young person. And understanding that that goal is present and available, can be actualized. And understanding that there is a method or a way, and that one can work very hard in a very determined way to realize that goal. One can actually move from childish dreams and stupid, far-flung ideas that can never happen, not into depression and sadness, not into places in our life where we cannot cope with our loss, but instead into a place where we can realize the ultimate goal, the goal that is so profound that according to the teaching it is said that should we come to the place where we adapt the Bodhisattva vow to the depth of our being, should we come to the place where we practice in order to achieve supreme enlightenment and dedicate our lives to be a vehicle for that practice, should we decide to achieve enlightenment, to achieve Buddhahood in order to benefit beings, should that benefit of beings become so important as to be more important than me and what I want, then and only then have we achieved everything there is to achieve in this precious human rebirth. Because there is no other achievement that is greater than this. Not money, not fame, not power, not competency of any kind. This is the jewel of accomplishment. There is nothing more than enlightenment. There is nothing more than the realization of the primordial wisdom state. There is no greater goal. This neuroses that I have described in my story about my friend, the man that I just spoke of, is so prevalent in our society that we write books about it as being normal. Passages in time. These are normal passages for us. Face it, it's a neuroses that we haven't cured yet. And it is because we do not understand that there is a goal that can sustain us until we reach supreme enlightenment. A goal at which the end of the path brings us the cessation of suffering in all forms. How can we come to that understanding? Because each one of us, in our way, has exhibited the story of this man. None of us are exempt from it in some way. Perhaps the way I describe this man sounds not very flattering. And we are unwilling to look at ourselves in this same light. Yet, we are all alike in this way. To some degree, we all have these characteristics. What does this have to do with the topic of the day and the topic of this retreat? The topic being the practice of devotion, or Guru Yoga. This practice of devotion that we have been practicing during this retreat, and that I have been teaching about for some time, and that all lamas in our tradition teach about, is considered to be the antidote for this kind of suffering. And yet it is not limited to solving only this kind of problem. You don't, like aspirin, take it only when you've got a headache or a fever. The practice of devotion, the practice of Guru Yoga as is practiced in our path, has many uses, has many qualities, has many areas in which it brings extraordinary fruit. Some of that I spoke of last night. Briefly, I spoke of the fact that all sentient beings are confused by their own five senses, involved in perceptual distortion that is based on the belief in self-nature as being inherently real. And that the practice of Guru Yoga, viewing the Guru and more specifically the nature of the Guru, viewing that nature to be consistent with, inseparable from, and the same as our own pristine nature. Learning to view the activity of the Guru in all phases of one's life. Learning to see all phenomena as the face of the Guru, and all events as the blessing of the Guru. Learning to practice Guru Rinpoche in that way, and to purify our deluded perception, our externalized, divided, neurotic perception. Through this practice, will bring about that precious quality which is consistent with enlightenment itself, the ultimate goal. The precious ability to perceive with pure cognition, to view purely without distortion. Specifically, to view the pristine nature, that which is called pure recognition. So Guru Yoga is used as a way to bring about that accomplishment, to ripen that ability. Yet, the practice of Guru Yoga is not limited to that. It can also be applied to the most basic foundational causes of suffering that all sentient beings experience. According to the Buddha, we suffer because of desire. We suffer because of desire that is the child of ego clinging. And you say, well, I'm poor and I like to be poor, and therefore I'm very simple, so I don't have much desire. And to put it blankly, I would have to say to you, baloney. It isn't like that at all. Our ego clinging is so divisive, is so all-pervasive, so sneaky, that sometimes we are prideful about our poverty, and it's just as much a pride as the pride we might have in richness, in being rich. And we have a pridefulness about our loneliness, and we have a pridefulness about our hatred, and we have a pridefulness about our accomplishments. We have a pridefulness about our lack of accomplishments. The ego is so divisive that you should take as proof that you have this ego clinging and this self-cherishing and this desire, the fact that you exist as an ordinary sentient being. You should assume that it is so, rather than pointing at others who have qualities and characteristics of ego clinging that are obvious to you. And from that perspective, our common humanity is obvious. We are the same, utterly the same. And the Buddha's teaching applies to all of us equally, whether we're Buddhist or not. That we suffer from desire. That desire is the child of ego clinging. And that ego clinging is the basic core characteristic here in cyclic existence. Our perception and our minds are utterly divided. All of our experience is externalized from the most subtle inner experience to the most obviously external experience. And we suffer because of that. We continue to revolve in cause and effect relationships that are brought about by this desire, by the intensity of our desire, and by the activity that we continue to involve ourselves in due to our desire. According to the Buddha, every bit of experience that we have now, every piece of suffering, every piece of joy, every piece of any kind of experience of any flavor is due to our past karma. The Buddha has been quoted as saying, if you want to know what you were like in the past, rather than asking someone to tell you what your past life was like, look at yourself now. And you can easily see. Look at the way you look at the way you act, look at your life, look at what you have, look at what you don't have. And you will see what your life was like in the past, what you did, who you were. That's the best answer, because cause and effect are never compromised, they are exacting. That is the experience of cyclic existence, and that is what is called karma. Lots of people say, I don't believe in karma. And I always say, do you believe that if I drop this, this will fall? Do you? Likely to fall? What do you think? Anybody think it's not going to fall? Watch that. Fell, didn't it? That's karma. So don't tell me you don't believe in karma. Have you gotten older since you were 10 years old? Yeah? You all look a little different than you did when you were 10. Then you believe in karma. Because you knew you would get old, you watched yourself get old, you knew that there would be a change between this time and the next. You knew. And that's what the Buddha teaches. Except the Buddha teaches that we don't know the root of this activity. We do not know what has actually taken place because we can only remember a small segment of our experience. Say 75, 80 years at the outside. A lifespan. And all the Buddha says about that is that there is more to it than that. This basic suffering that is woven into the fabric of our experience, that is the root cause for our experience, that is the basis for our perception, our experience, our past and our present and our future, is desire and self-cherishing, which are born of ego clinging. The belief in self-nature as being inherently real. How can we practice in order to transform this cause of suffering? Well, actually, the Buddha has laid out a very involved path. And there are many variations within that path. One can take the long route, one can take the medium route, and one can take the short route. One can take a very external route, one can take an intermediate route, and one can take a very profound inner route. And even within these three different vehicles, one can practice many different kinds of teachings, many different methods, there are many different segments of information. In our vehicle, the Vajrayana vehicle, and specifically in the Nyingma school, there is preliminary, intermediate, advanced, and completion stage practice, ultimate practice. Each of these practices can bring about the desired result. It is said that in this vehicle of Vajrayana, one can practice for one lifetime and achieve results if one practices deeply and sincerely. Deeply and sincerely means something, though. It doesn't mean a half an hour of meditation a day. It doesn't mean thinking good thoughts. It means extensive retreat. It means a lot of work. And most of us in our modern day don't have that kind of time. It means accomplishing a technology that is so complicated and profound that it requires a great deal, truly, to accomplish. Yet, within this vehicle, according to all of the teachings that I have ever heard, there is one practice that is the pith and the core that will bring about every result, whether one makes it to the Dzogchen completion stage practice or not. And that practice is the practice of Guru Yoga. As I understand it, Guru Yoga is the one practice which can be done without fault, safely, easily, and by anyone. Can be practiced while one walks around, can be practiced while one sleeps, and can be practiced while one is practicing. This practice can become the fabric of one's life. It can be experienced in the depth of one's heart and can be understood in all of one's experience. If one wishes to practice, let's say, generation stage practice, which is one of the intermediate levels of practice on our path, generating oneself as a Buddha form, as a deity, with pure qualities, exhibiting pure activities, one would have to practice for years until one receives the proper result. Having excellent Vajra confidence, pride in oneself as the deity, utter confidence, the same confidence that one has when one knows that if you don't move the chair, I can sit on it. Just knowing how phenomena works, that kind of confidence, knowing that if I drink this water, it will be wet. That firm confidence in the practice. And one would have to do many repetitions of mantra in order for that confidence to occur. Many repetitions meaning many millions of repetitions in order for that confidence to occur. And the practice has to be done correctly also. If the practice is done in a haphazard way or with distraction, if it is done when one is sleepy, or if puja is not performed correctly, one will have limited result. Practicing more advanced practices than that, practices in which one wishes, for instance, to take the breath into the central channel and accomplish at that point the realization of the non-dual state. That practice is not without some danger. It is not practiced easily, and it too must be accomplished extensively. One has to put a lot of effort into it. And if it is not done well, it can be a problem. And the ultimate levels of practice, they are deep. They require a great deal of concentration, a great deal of mindfulness, a great deal of perseverance, a great deal of depth. There are many teachings that are so profound that even if we listen to them now, it would be utterly meaningless to us. We would understand the words, we might understand the images, we might understand the content of the vocabulary, but we would not understand the teaching. It would be like trying to feed a newborn baby pieces of meat. They can't swallow it. They cannot eat it. And it will do them no good, even though it's food and can be nourishing and can save lives. It will choke them and poison them. There are teachings like that. Yet, the Lamas teach us that there is one teaching which is practiced in the earliest preliminary stages of Ngundro, through the intermediate, advanced, and ultimate Dzogchen practice. That in a safe way, in a consistent way, effortless way, will provide the ultimate result. There is nothing like that. The practice of Guru Yoga, the practice of devotion, if one is mindful, if one practices it from the depth of one's heart, constantly and consistently and purely, will bring about the ultimate result. We have received many teachings about Guru Rinpoche, about the ultimate meaning of Guru Rinpoche, about the sameness of Guru Rinpoche with one's own nature, that when looking at the face of Guru Rinpoche and one's own root teacher, one sees ultimately one's own face. We have received teachings about that, and still it is hard to understand. But I promise you the understanding will come easier as we continue to practice. It is impossible to understand that view without sincere practice of devotion. No one understands it without devotion. No one. And we should consider as well this teaching, that we make many prayers to be reborn in the copper-colored mountain. And we understand vaguely that the copper-colored mountain is the Buddha field of Guru Rinpoche, that it is the emanation of Guru Rinpoche, that it is the pure display of Guru Rinpoche, even as Dewa Chen are considered the pure display or the emanation of Lord Buddha Amitabha. But do we understand that Guru Rinpoche and the copper-colored mountain, the meaning of that is the same as and inseparable from ourselves in this way, that they are the same as the pure luminosity of one's own central channel. That to pray to be reborn in Dewa Chen is to pray to experience non-dual nature. To pray to be reborn in the copper-colored mountain is to pray to experience non-dual nature. To have the pristine, pure cognition of the experience of non-duality as experienced when one accomplishes the view of having cleared the central channel. It's so difficult for us to understand because all of our information is computed with a computer that only inputs externalization. We only have the information that we have been given. We have no direct experience of non-duality ourselves. We can only understand duality in a dualistic way. We can only understand non-duality in a dualistic way. We can only understand the goal as being separate from our experience. So hard to understand. And that is why Guru Rinpoche himself gave us the practice of devotion and told us to consider our own root teachers as the support for our devotion. To consider our own root teachers as the same as him, when he said in his own words, "In the time to come, I will be there as your root teacher." The same situation, inner situation, karmic situation that requires us to practice in this way. And that is the same situation and the same specifically karmic situation that causes us to continue revolving with dualistic perception. Guru Yoga then, practiced purely and in the way that is given from Lord Buddha Guru Rinpoche himself, is considered to be the antidote to that suffering, the root suffering of sentient beings. Externalized perception or ego clinging, and all of the desire that comes from that. In the beginning, it is the entry into the path. To the extent that you practice devotion, to that extent will you be able to receive empowerment. To the extent that you practice devotion, to that extent will you accomplish the entry into the path and some understanding. To continue, to the extent that you practice Guru Yoga, to the extent that you practice devotion and have that devotion become all-pervasive, to that extent, the Buddha nature that you are will ripen from a hard green fruit, from a seed of potential, to the succulent nourishment that will ultimately benefit all sentient beings. On this path, and there is no exception, there is no practice without Guru Yoga. It is visible, the difference in the depth of a practitioner who practices Guru Yoga and in the depth of a practitioner who practices it superficially or not at all. The difference in the result is palpable. I read in a book by His Holiness Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche himself that he said all of the great lamas, every one, even those that have passed down enormous, vast teachings of the great Dzogchen, the ones that we think are so marvelous, so wonderful, the ones that we practically pant over trying to get, have all said, but the real practice is Guru Yoga. Read the life stories of the great lamas. They practiced Guru Yoga until they died. And felt that that was the core of their practice and nothing else. And according to Khyentse Rinpoche as well, the practice of Guru Yoga is like a great hook of compassion that is born in the very heart stream of Guru Rinpoche, who is inseparable from the nature of emptiness. And it has the capability of hooking each and every fortunate disciple at whatever level of practice they are involved in. Whatever level, even preliminary stage, and bringing about the ultimate result. It is the only practice of its kind that the hook of compassion is so great that under any circumstances it can bring about the most fortunate result. And without this practice, we are only magpieing the teachings. There is no depth, no meaning. When we receive empowerment, it is like nothing. Without devotion, there is no path. I didn't make this up. These are not my teachings. Everything I have ever read taught by the greatest lamas, whose histories are passed down to us. Not that I claim to have read so much, but everything that I have read and everything that I have heard and everything that I know about them teaches me that they used Guru Yoga as the ultimate antidote to self-absorption, which is the ultimate suffering that humankind and all sentient beings experience. It is an antidote that is unequaled by any other. And so profound and moving that when applied brings a depth and joyfulness that no other practice can bring. Without that practice, I can tell you that from my own experience, relatively speaking, I feel that I would be like a shell. I know I'm not telling you this from any other base of experience than my own, and I can vouch for that. I am no great Lama, and that is the experience that has brought me the most joy. And it is also the root of my own practice. I would say that, in essence, I have no other practice. So, I offer you this. You can do with it what you want. But I hope that you will make this teaching your own teaching, that you will make it useful for yourself, that it will deepen your practice and cause you to understand the value of Guru Yoga. And that I hope also from this point on, you will be determined to see Guru Rinpoche in all things, to see his blessing in every event of your life, good or bad, so that you can understand the intrinsic nature of all phenomena and your own nature as well, so that you can view the sphere of truth with pure perception. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for coming today. And we're always glad to have you with us. Let me see. Giving you an idea of what's coming up this week. Today is Wednesday. This coming Sunday, we would normally have a teaching by Jetsunma Lhamo, but this Sunday, instead, we will have, you can participate with us in a smoke offering, Riro Sangcho, and led by Khenpo Pem, I think, or at least he'll be there. And he'll also be talking on Guru Rinpoche and answering questions. It'll be outside in front of the Guru Rinpoche statue here at KPC. You're welcome to come, bring your own chair or, something to sit on, whether it's on the ground or on a chair, because we don't really have staff to set it up right now. But we're happy to have you come with us. And if not, you can join us right here where you are on YouTube. So there's your choices, and we hope you will make it on this coming Sunday. Jetsunma's teachings will resume on Wednesday at 7:30 next Wednesday. In addition, though, we have meditation on YouTube Saturdays and Sundays at 10 a.m. That will continue. And we have Medicine Buddha on Facebook every evening at 7 p.m. And it's a very short practice. It's mostly in English, not all, but mostly. And it's a condensed practice that will bring lots of benefit, especially now in this time where so many people are getting ill or, sick or dying or, need of medicine. And this is Medicine Buddha, and it's very potent. And you can do it with other people. You can bring your requests for prayers to that practice and share them with people and get some support. So it's a very potent thing to do. Soak offerings we have every single day. That's food offering ceremonies. We've got a little bit of changes here. Monday through Friday has been at 5 p.m. Tuesdays have been changed to 4 p.m. Saturdays at noon and Sundays at 2. Every other Friday has been changed also to 4 p.m. This is just for the next couple of months because we have some staffing changes. So, so join us. If you're having trouble remembering those dates and times, I certainly would. Please consider looking at the calendar on tara.org, which is on www.tara.org, and look under Meditate, Pray, Study, and you'll find the calendar, and you'll also find where you can watch the practices that are on YouTube in that same space. So this is what we are. So what we're sharing with you. The outside is always open days from dawn to dusk. So please come, walk the land, visit the statues, visit the stupas, and enjoy the fabulous mandala that Jetsunma has created here. That's just filled with supports for your practice. The inside not yet open, but we hope soon, and we totally welcome your presence outside. So there's lots to enjoy out there, and so come. And that's about all I've got for right now. So have a wonderful week. Hope to see you either in person or online on Sunday. And otherwise, we'll catch up with you next week. Thank you so much.